Thanks for coming to Permaculture Center Kamimomi in Okayama, Japan. I'm going to give you a little tour of the property. Just to kind of get your orientation set, we're facing the property from the east, and below the road is gardens and rice paddies, and above the road fields and kind of the main infrastructure of the site. And basically everything you see here is a part of the property. So why don't I take you for a walk through the property. By the way, kind of throughout the property there's a lot of different fruit trees. In this area you'll find a lot of persimmons. That's what we have here, a small persimmon. And there's also lots of mulberries. They almost grow like weeds here. So we've got a mulberry there, a small flowering cherry that I planted this spring. And this is how most people visiting the site will visit the site. This is our parking lot. It's full of stuff right now, so it's not really a parking lot, but we have some timbers left over from our timber framing workshop that we did last fall in December. We had a teacher come from the United States named Steve Chappell, and he's been teaching timber framing workshops for about 35 years, and he wanted to come to Japan, and I was talking to him, and we together, it was actually last October, we did the timber frame structure that you see up there to the west of the other buildings. And now we're just getting the rafters prepared for that building. All of the timber so far in the structure and these rafters, it's all from the property. So now we'll go through and level a surface on all these rafters and prepare them to go up on the roof. Originally the structure we had planned for a tile roof, but I think we're going to lower the ridge and put up a living roof, and once you get up there you'll see why. Yeah, this is a big mulberry tree. Mulberries are kind of special because of all these multiple functions they have. The leaves fall and improve the soil. The leaves are actually even edible. They're good for fodder. Silkworms eat them. They have an edible berry. So there's lots of uses for the mulberry tree. And these well rings that you see under the mulberry tree, they were actually a well kind of at the end of this pond originally. There's a natural spring that flows into this pond, and we removed those rings and we dug this pond because for a number of reasons. One, the most important one, I wanted someplace to swim in summer, but two, also to create this microclimate behind the pond for maybe fruit trees that we normally couldn't grow in this climate. And also as an aesthetic feature between the parking lot and as you enter the site. So as you come from the parking lot into the site, you kind of know immediately that this is, not your usual farm. So you come this way, and here are some garden beds that Casey and Yuka-chan just made. There's Casey there. He's from the United States, from New York. And Casey's been here for about a month.
A month, that's right, yeah.
Kind of becoming a member of our community. And these are intensive garden beds. Just planted them out, and they're kind of on a main passageway right between the parking lot and the center of the site.
Cool, good idea. And
then once you would enter the site up this staircase, and then past here would be. So this is an intensively used garden bed. This is the extensively used area for crops that basically you plant and harvest. So we just harvested a crop of wheat from here, and now we're getting ready for a crop of soybeans. Casey and Yuka-chan also built this staircase. So this is a barn at least 100 years old that's scheduled to come down. I don't know when it's going to come down, but the structure's in pretty bad shape, and it's actually being held up by a couple of wires at this point. And here, Kylie is teaching bamboo basket weaving to people. Can I introduce you?
Yes.
Okay. That's Morgan in the back. He's from Seattle, currently going to school in Colorado, visiting us for the summer. Kylie, who's from Colorado,
Yep.
and
Yes.
also spent the last year in Japan, working on different farms and stuff. And Soro-kun from Chiba Prefecture, and he's been with us basically from the beginning. Met him in Chiba Prefecture. Knew he was a really special guy from the moment we met, and we've been working together both here and doing different plastering jobs throughout Japan. And Yukashi-san
Hello.
from Tokyo.
Tokyo.
In Tokyo. And you last year you worked in Nagano on different organic farms.
I did. Yeah.
Organic
And
farming. together.
Organic farming. Yeah. It's growing some more veggies here. That's the plan.
So Casey and Yuka-chan have been super helpful in getting our gardens jump started, because as you'll see, the property is really big and there are 101 things going on simultaneously, and it's really difficult to do things that, it's like almost everything we do is like an urgency, is an emergency, and we just go from one emergency to the next. So it's been really helpful to have people that put time into the gardens and stuff. Most of the water on the property is natural spring water. There's actually no municipal water on site. So there are a couple of springs that we have piped at this point coming down here. They were going to the house, but because the plumbing in the house has some issues, all the water is being piped to here now. And it's really good water. Really nice. And then that water flows down here. There was originally a PVC pipe that came out here, but that PVC pipe has been crushed and is broken, so now the water is leaking out. And we recently dug this trench to divert the water this way to build a little constructed wetland for the garden. And this provides water for the garden for watering. It also creates a special biotope where, let's say, frogs might live and they'll prey on the kind of the insects in the garden. And it also moderates the humidity. This area gets really hot and dry in summer, so I'm hoping that's going to help as well. This is kind of our intensive vegetable garden. It's very close to Zone 0, the main house on the property. And it also has this special microclimate. To the north side of the garden is the stone wall, which absorbs a lot of thermal heat and then gives that off at night when it cools. The negative thing is that in summer, it actually gets really hot and dry here. And although last year we had an excellent veggie garden, I'm thinking in the future of potentially building a greenhouse here, and maybe also planting some dwarf fruit trees, like this peach. That's deciduous, so during the summer it leaves out and it shades the wall, and then in winter those leaves drop and the wall can absorb the sun's heat. This is a kumquat. Masumi-chan's herb garden. Oh, there she is now. Masumi-chan. I'm giving Rongomai a little tour of the property. Masumi-chan is from Fukuoka, and she's been really active in the garden and in the herbs. And she's also like super artsy fartsy, like she likes to do dyeing and like textiles and stuff like that. なんか一言ないですか? This is Masumi-chan's rye. And I'm not sure what these ones are called in English. They're like the lantern tomatoes, tomatillos. Tomatillos, I think that's what they're called. And as you move farther from the house, you get away from the more intensive gardens and into the more extensive gardens. So in this area are the crops that we would generally just plant and harvest, like onions, garlic, potatoes, those kind of crops. To the north is our orchard. There's Japanese plum, persimmon, flowering cherries, and also Asian pears, but what we have the most of are yuzu, this very aromatic Japanese citrus. And right along this path that leads from the timber frame building and the house and down to the orchard and gardens is a site that we're leveling for a compost, a 3-bin compost system, where we'll probably compost our composting toilet, goods for at least initially until we have a different setup set up. And basically the location here, it's along this path of movement. The roots of the fruit trees can take advantage of any nutrients leaching out, and also those nutrients will probably flow with water, so they'll go to the gardens below the composting, and then even the fields below that. You can see that the Japanese plums need to be harvested. They're starting to fall off the tree. This is the foundation for the timber frame building. These huge stones. These stones are buried in the ground at least half the size of the stone, so you can imagine how big these stones were. They're all from this mountain. The local construction company helped us get them over here, and then during the workshop last fall with Fox Maple, we put the stones in place and then scribed the post to sit on the stone, and that's kind of a trademark of Steve's timber frame buildings. You'll also notice that the ground level of the building is about here, and where I'm standing, is at least a good 1.5 meters below that, which is creating a difference in elevation between the south and the north side of the building. And I hope that we can use that difference in elevation to build a Korean-style heated floor, an undol, where we'll have the firebox here with a heat riser, and then that will flow under the floor and heat the floor and out the building. That's the main house. I expect that in the future that's going to be kind of a classroom community center for us. It will have a kitchen and bath, which it doesn't have now, large classroom space, and then living upstairs. This is a kura. A kura is a Japanese earthen storehouse where people would generally store their valuable possessions to protect them from fire, and they would also store food rations like rice and miso and vegetables because of the very stable climate it has. It has a timber frame with very thick earthen walls, and those thick earthen walls protect things from fire and also provide a very stable temperature and humidity. Last year in July, we re-tiled the roof. We took off all the tiles, took off all the rafters, and then with a group of students from Marseille University in France, we worked with carpenters to put on new rafters and worked with a tile roofer to put on new tiles. we're standing behind the timber frame building now, and you can see that when you're up here, if this was a tile roof and you couldn't see on the other side, you'd really be missing something. It's like almost you just want to get on top of that roof and you want to see the other side. So I'm thinking we're going to lower the ridge of the building. We're going to put on a much larger ridge beam, and then we're going to make a living roof with a bridge from here to get up on there. And I think that's going to be a really special place. It's going to have a fantastic view of the valley. This is the yuzu, the aromatic Japanese citrus, and you can see all the small yuzu on here now. I haven't counted the number of trees, but it's at least 30 trees, maybe more. And last year we harvested over 300 kilos of yuzu. And I'm hoping that in the future we can kind of develop a specialty product with our yuzu, like a yuzu Japanese rice wine mix or something like that. That persimmon tree has the most incredible sweet persimmons. Crunchy and sweet, not astringent at all. Incredible. This is one of two horizontal wells on the property. And looks like this got a little clogged up maybe. Because the water level is really high. Oh, this one's high too. Okay. We'll check the tank. Check the tank behind the house because there's nothing stopping this water from flowing. So it should just flow right out of the pipes down there. Maybe it is flowing, but this is that's the flow rate of it. And in the future we'll build a structure around and over this well and also put a cover on that. And then once we have a roof and walls on this, it's really going to help keep the trash from falling down in here. There's always leaves falling and stuff like that, debris. So we'll be building a spring house here. So Rongomai just suggested this would be a really nice location for a sauna. It's a ways from the house. I was thinking the sauna might be a little bit closer to the center of action, but yeah, be nice to have cold water, the cold spring water and the hot sauna. And there's incredible views of the valley from here. I'm also thinking this would be a really cool place for a small cottage, like a 10 square meter cottage.
Like a retreat or something, just to chill out from the chaos.
Yep.
Yeah, it's good.
Oh, and I should have mentioned the path that we were on behind the timber frame. The road, I don't know if you kind of recall that, right? I imagine extending that so it goes through the orchard to the far side of the property and then comes back around just above where we are now. So let's crawl up there. Climb up. So that's a Japanese cedar, plantation Japanese cedar that we just came through. And this is mixed species deciduous in a coppice rotation. These trees were just felled the fall of 2016. You're familiar with a coppice rotation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So They were these were actually cut down for mushroom production for oyster and shiitake mushrooms. But you could use them for fuel or anything. When the
Did you produce the mushrooms, or was it to sell to people?
The neighbor cut these down before
okay.
we got onto the property.
Okay.
Because we've only been here since March of last year.
Okay.
Yeah. But I guess the nice thing about that is it opened up this view that we probably wouldn't have noticed otherwise. And the road I was talking about, it would extend out and go to the far side of the property and then come back through here. I haven't been very back far that way. Lots of grass that needs to be cut to get back there. This is one of the largest, flattest rice paddies on the property. You can see that this field hasn't grown rice in probably 5-10 years, probably 10 years or so. I'm not sure what this is called in English, but it's in the bean family. It's called nemonoki in Japanese. I think it's acacia. It's in the bean family, nitrogen fixer. So the property includes that cypress, Japanese cypress, grove there, the plantation, this meadow, and the mixed deciduous trees behind it. And I imagine that road going out into the meadow behind the cypress, and then coming back on that path that we were just on. And that will allow us to make better use of this space back here. It's got really good privacy, and who knows? Maybe it's farm fields, maybe it's small cottages in like a Klein garden type setting, or maybe it's glamping. Who knows what it'll become.
Now, see, there's water down there, isn't there? Like a little pond or something?
Yeah, did you notice that?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's actually a well, a spring at the far end. It used to be a dam. You can see the old dam wall. There's no water in the dam now. All the water's leaked out, and there's trees growing up in the dam. But yeah, there was a dam over there, spring in a dam.
And what's all this vine growing everywhere?
Oh, this is kazoo.
Kazoo. Okay.
You know kazoo?
Yeah. I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's a problematic plant in North America. Common use in Japan is getting a starch from the roots. The wild pigs like to eat the roots of this plant. And that meadow is actually an old tobacco field. Land that's zoned for a particular use.
Yeah.
And this parcel of land that we're on right now, this is zoned for rice. But it's obvious that you couldn't grow rice here. So you can go through a process of having the zoning changed. And we could have this zoning changed to either mountain or meadow. And once we have it changed from agricultural to non-agricultural, it opens up a lot of possibilities for how we can use the land. We could build on this. There's lots of other things that we could do with this land if we change the zoning. It's a pretty straightforward process, and there's just a lot of paperwork involved in doing it. And according to the maps of this property, this is a road or a path, and you can see the trees growing right in the middle of the path. I don't think this path hasn't been maintained for probably well over 10 years.
So it's just on the kind of the ridge line coming down.
Yeah. all of these paths were, the dimensions were designed for cattle. Up until the 1960s, cattle was the main source of draft work on these farms in this village. It's interesting to note that during the Edo period, in Edo, which is like the Tokyo area, there were very few livestock. Because of the population density, almost all arable land was used for growing food for humans. Whereas in this part of Japan, because of the terraced rice fields, there's so much of the property that can't be used for farming because of the steep slope. But what that area does produce is lots of grasses and weeds, which can be fed to livestock. So that's why you saw that draft animals were used so much longer in this part of Japan than other areas of Japan.
So when did they stop using them?
1960s.
Oh.
Yeah, economic development in the 1960s, they started using the walk-behind rototillers. And most of the old-timers in this community remember using cattle for draft work, for tilling the fields and hauling lumber and things like that. You see a really predictable settlement pattern in a lot of Japanese villages, where you have a river, rice paddies, vegetable gardens, the house, and then plantation and mixed deciduous forest behind the house. And it almost follows like permaculture principles to the T. The paddies are near the river because that's where you can source water from easily. And they're located below the house because they take advantage of any of the gray water flowing from the house down. First, that gray water is used in the gardens and then in the rice paddies. The house is kind of located at the key point in the slope between the concave and the convex part of the slope. And then above the house you have your plantation forest and your deciduous forest, because you want to utilize gravity to move those heavy things down to make use of them. And you kind of see that although we're located very high here, you're seeing a similar design with this property as well. The rice paddies in the gardens are below the house, and then above the house you have this mixed deciduous and this plantation forest. And all of this plantation forest isn't a part of Permaculture Center Kamimomi, but 3 blocks of this area are. And this is one of those blocks here, starting here. And coming to about here. When I first came out here and looking at the plantation forest, this is all Japanese cypress. I thought it all looked the same, but actually when I surveyed the site, referring to a map, I could see the property lines. Like, for example, if you look at the trees on the left here and then the trees on the right, you can see the difference in diameter, the difference in age between these trees, and this is the property line for one of our blocks. This was probably planted out maybe 30 years ago. This area was originally garden and tobacco fields, and it was also managed communally, meaning there weren't individual owners. But I don't know how many years ago, 30, 40 years ago, they decided to have private ownership of this shared land, and blocks of this land were sectioned off for the people working these fields. So this is one of the blocks, and there's 2 more blocks that way.
So would you harvest these trees yourself, or would you get some contractor to come in and?
There are a couple of they call them in Japanese shusaiki, which means machines with chains and a motor and a reel, and it can pull logs quite a long distance. It's a very long chain, and you basically you strap this machine. The machine has caterpillars, so it can go up and down these narrow paths. You strap it to a tree, one or two trees behind it, and then you can pull logs without it flipping over quite a long way. So we could use that to pull from here down, or there's actually a road above us that we could pull up to.
Yeah, cool.
And we've been doing a lot of chainsaw sawmilling. And I don't have the trucks to carry this myself, but if we did want to hire somebody, we could have the logs taken to a mill and then milled. But what I've heard is that if you pay to have the logs taken to the mill and milled, you're going to pay a higher price than what you would if you just bought the trees, because of economy of scale and efficiency of the infrastructure already in place. So in permaculture design, your zone 5 is your untouched area, the area that you would only go for observation or meditation. And the traditional Japanese Satoyama, the traditional Japanese mountain village, the top of the mountain is the zone 5, and that provided native habitat for wildlife, and for a kind of a spiritual center for people. So at the top of this mountain, we have the original shrine for this mountain, and we also have the temple. And if you'd like, we can walk up there and see the old shrine location. The shrine has now been moved to a more convenient location, but its original location is the top of this mountain. Let's walk up there and see. We're at the top of the mountain. This is the location of the original Kamimomi shrine, and we're actually just right above Permaculture Center Kamimomi. This shrine has been moved to a more convenient location because it's not very convenient for the elderly population in this community. The average age is 78 to come up to the top of the mountain. But although the shrine isn't here anymore, this still is I think the spiritual center of this mountain. You know how to pray at a shrine?
I've forgotten.
Okay, I'll show you. It's 2 bows, 1, 2, 2 claps, and then a bow. You want to give it a try? Permaculture Center Kamimomi also has 1 block of plantation forest on this north side of this road. I'm not sure of the location, I haven't surveyed it yet, but I know it exists, it's on the map.
So did you just buy a whole bunch of property from one person?
That's right.
And it was just whatever they had?
Yeah, that's right. And I don't know why this is, but Japanese parcels of land tend to be much more broken up than they do in Europe or North America or New Zealand, Australia. I'm not sure why.
It doesn't really make sense to me, but
I think it has to do with before World War II, land was owned by these landowners, and then part of the U.S. occupation and restructuring of Japan was breaking up those powerful landowners and distributing the land to the farmers farming that land. So that's why if the farmer was growing rice here and vegetables over here and living here, they ended up owning land in 3 different locations as opposed to 1 location. This spring we planted 1,000 shiitake plugs and 1,000 oyster mushroom plugs. In our bamboo grove we have these logs placed, and if you go a little bit farther on the right there's an old charcoal kiln, and directly ahead under the green sheet is a bunch of old charcoal. We'll walk down towards the house. some large Japanese cedar trees. And you can see Casey was doing some edauchi, which means to take the limbs off of the lower 2/3 of the trees. The reason you take the limbs off is to, of course, reduce the number of knots in your lumber, but it also allows more air and light to come through, increases the vegetation on these slopes behind the house, which in turn increases the moisture holding capacity and increases the stability of the slope. This is the tank that the well flows to, that we saw earlier. That the well, or the spring, flows to this tank here, and then from this tank it flows to the main house. I think in the future we're going to put our main water tank behind the timber frame structure, and then from there it will flow to the kura and to the main house, and then the overflow will go to another holding tank at the bottom of this cascade of uses, and we'll probably have that hooked up to a solar powered water pump, so on sunny days it pumps water back up to the main tank at the top, and all the water is provided through gravity. These are some of the old shiitake logs. We were getting some shiitake mushrooms even as recently as last year, but I think these are probably all spent. This is the shrine for the water god for the property. I mean, we should really take better care of this, keep it clear of weeds, and kind of respect the water god, because she sure takes care of us. Before we walk down and kind of show you around the buildings, I want to kind of show you this other way of entering the site. So when we first entered the site, we came in kind of from the public parking lot, and now we're here above the site and we're coming in kind of the private driveway. And this is just a dream now, but I'm thinking that in the future we can take down this building here. It definitely needs to come down, and build a timber frame garage here. So the cars, like this car here, of the people who live on site, will park up here, and they'll come in and pull their car into the timber frame garage. And underneath the parking there'll be storage space for long lumber. And then they'll enter the site from above rather than coming in from below. And of course the advantage from coming in from above is that when you carry things home, like groceries or anything, you're using gravity in entering the site and not carrying them up from below. On the left over there, looking from this direction on the left, there's our tool shed. The structure of the building's in good condition, but it does need a new roof over there. And then in the middle of this area here was a tobacco drying shed, a timber frame with earthen walls where you would light a fire inside to smoke dry tobacco, but the roof had collapsed and the building was on the verge of collapsing, so we took that down. And then on the right is that timber frame barn. That's really cute. It would be really nice to restore, but there are a couple of real serious problems with it. One, it's really leaning and it's just being held up by a couple of cables, and two, the posts on that south side of the building are right in the middle of the driveway going up to the house. And in the days when they used cattle for draft work, it wasn't such a big deal, but it would really be nice to be able to drive a truck up in front of the house. Not only for ease of use and the convenience of that, but also in the case of you needing to use an ambulance or a fire truck, it would be nice if those vehicles, those larger vehicles, could get further into the site. So I'm thinking this building is going to come down, which is really going to open up a lot of space, very central here. Immediately that space can be used for gardens, but I think in the future we'd like to use that space for maybe a workshop, a cafe, rice bran, enzyme spa, and maybe like dorm type living space for people who come for workshops. Are you familiar with the fermented rice bran enzyme spas?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was telling you about those.
Yeah, they're great.
Well, can I repeat myself just for the video?
Sure.
So, a lot of the farmers in this area sell their rice to Japan Agriculture, which is fine, but they make about $1,000 for a quarter acre of rice, on a quarter acre of rice. And when they consider their fertilizer costs, their agricultural chemicals, the fuel for their machinery, the depreciation of their machinery, it almost leaves nothing for wages. And that's why all the farmers are quitting and more rice paddies are being abandoned. So rather than going through JA, let's create a brand like Kamimomi rice. Kamimomi terraced rice. And we sell directly to consumers. And just by doing that alone, we double our profits because GA generally takes about half the cut of that. And then if we can start growing organic, we can make even more. And when milling brown rice into white rice, you get rice bran. And that rice bran can be pressed to produce rice oil, which can be another product for the farmers. And that can have the same brand, Kamimomi terraced rice field rice oil. And the cloudy oil that isn't used for food grade oil can be used for ink on the packaging. Right now at the local convenience store 7-Eleven, the rice balls that are sold there are packaged and printed with rice ink. It even says rice ink on the package. So our packaging can also be printed with rice ink. And then that pressed rice bran can be used in the fermented rice bran spa. Basically it's like a rice bran compost. The respiration and the reproduction of the microorganisms in the rice bran produce heat. And you bury your body in that hot rice bran, and it's like a sauna effect. In fact, the rice bran gets up to about 65 degrees Celsius, so it's very hot. You can only stay in for about 15 minutes. And there's an immediate, the immediate detoxification effect, but also once you get out and you shower off and you lay down and rest, there's a super relaxation effect. You kind of just pass out for 30 minutes and then come to and you feel much more relaxed. In the fermented rice bran spa, there's two types of fermentation. There's anaerobic and aerobic, and many places in Japan do anaerobic, but we'd like to do aerobic. It smells much better. It has like kind of this sweet, savory smell, but also the microorganisms that you're cultivating in that aerobic fermentation is exactly what the gardens and the fields want. So after the fermented rice bran spa, that spent rice bran becomes the ideal fertilizer for the rice paddies in the gardens. And maybe through that we can help transition the neighboring farmers towards organic. So those are kind of the purposes that we're thinking about for this space here. There's a movement in Japan that's becoming quite popular called Daichi no Saisei.
Do you want to just try that again? Just
Sure.
I got to adjust for the light being really dark.
You good?
Nope.
Okay.
Yep.
There's a movement in Japan called Daichi no Saisei, which kind of means like regenerative landscaping. And in March we hosted our first Daichi no Saisei workshop, and we've been hosting monthly Daichi no Saisei and permaculture workshops here. And this is an example of a regenerative landscaping French drain. So in your usual French drain, you use drainage pipe and gravel to create waterways for water to move through. And in this case, what we've done is we dug a trench behind the house, sloped it to carry water away, and we put in your regular agricultural drainage pipe in there. Well, first we put in charcoal, and then we put in your standard drainage pipe, and on top of that drainage pipe we put in bamboo, and then on top of the bamboo we put in bamboo grass. I know what that is.
I don't.
Sorry, I didn't mention it, but actually this is another well, another natural spring on the property. It's a horizontal well, and what we sound the sound that we just heard was the water flowing through this pipe here. This is the pipe that flows down to the spring water that I originally showed you. And if you listen, you can hear the water not only of this natural spring flowing, but you can also hear the water, just all of the water behind the house flowing. And that's why we put in this drainage. We really need a drainage. You can see from the building here how green these timbers are. That's just because there's too much moisture back here, and we needed to get this moisture out of here. So we dug a trench, sloped it, put in charcoal, put in the drainage pipe, and then put in bamboo and then bamboo grass. And the bamboo and bamboo grass are both high in silica, resistant to decay, but they're not supposed to last forever. Actually, what happens is the bacteria and fungi start breaking down the organic matter, and then the arthropods and the nematodes come in and they start eating those bacteria and fungi, and then other arthropods and earthworms come in and they eat those organisms, and then the moles come in and they eat the worms, and gradually you build like this sponge structure, this organic sponge behind the house. So rather than relying on gravel, which at some point will probably clog in the future, we're building a natural organic soil here with good drainage to allow water to flow through. And that's what these vertical pipes are. They're allowing oxygen into that to create an aerobic life in the soil. So we've created a natural French drain behind the building, which slopes out in front of the main house. You want to see some sun-dried bricks?
Yes.
For our last workshop, we had a pool filled with base coat plaster, but we wanted to clean up this space and to move this out of here. So Sodokun built some formwork, and Sodokun led the adobe making for here, and he made the adobe that we have storing in the upstairs of our barn over here. This is the old barn. We'll be taking down, but for the time being, it's got some adobe drying in here and some other things we need to clean out. This is the old compost outhouse. There's at least 2 concrete rings in there. The width of the rings is 170 centimeters in the interior diameter, and the depth is 130 centimeters. And I'd like to turn this into a biogas digester. So we need a main toilet. We've got lots of people who come for workshops, and the composting toilets tend to fill up quick, so it would be great if we could turn this into a biogas digester. And we'll build a toilet here. There'll probably be some new toilets with the new construction, and maybe a flush toilet on the second floor or first floor of this building. And we're planning on building a kitchen addition on the main house here, so we can make use of that biogas here for our cooking. It's difficult to imagine, but when we first got on the property about a year ago, this was basically all overgrown with weeds. The grass probably hadn't been cut in about 5 years. The outbuildings were full of old farm machinery and agricultural chemicals and garbage, but over the last year we've taken a lot of time to clear out the site and to slowly cut back the weeds, and we've made it this much progress in about a year and a half, and in another year from now please come back and see how things have progressed. Thanks for coming to visit.